Hey homies, it's Zach, Ohio Skater, and I'm gonna do another like movie synopsis, summary, review type thing. I like doing those. The first one I did was Black Klansman. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out, or watch Black Klansman, then go check it out. It's a good movie and a good video I made. I think solid. So, but today we're doing a different movie. Today we're doing a movie called In a Valley of Violence. Now, this is a Western, a current day Western. It came out in the current day, but it takes place back then, obviously. So it's a Western, and it's got action, it's got a good story, it's got anything you could want in a Western. Yeah, it starts off with this guy named Paul. Well, no, it starts off with a man in the middle of the desert screaming for help. He's screaming for help, and then Paul, the guy, it starts out with Paul coming to find him. Paul finds this guy, and this guy he finds is like a preacher, and he's saying he goes around and travels and preaches, but he's drinking like whiskey and stuff, and he's saying his mule is ruined, it won't work anymore. Paul is like, he says to Paul, like, I need to go over to this town, over this ridge, and go preach to these people, because he travels around preaching, and he says this town, Denton, Texas, is a place of sinners, and he needs to go there and save their souls. He says this place doesn't even have a church anymore. He's trying to go there and save them. But Paul obviously notices that he's like drinking, and then the preacher, he tries to steal Paul's horse, and Paul gets his dog to attack the preacher, and the preacher's laying there. Paul doesn't kill him, he just takes his bullets and heads on to Denton. Paul wants to go to Mexico. He's running from something, and he wants to make it down to Mexico, so he's traveling with his horse and his dog, and he's really close to his dog. His dog is his best companion, and his dog is important for the movie. So he really loves this dog, and this dog just attacked this preacher for him. He obviously has him trained well to attack people he needs him to attack. And so before he leaves, the religious preacher man laying out there in the desert, he says something like, I stopped listening to guys like you a long time ago, going around pretending to preach the word of God. So kind of calling out this preacher on his bullshit. Obviously, he knows the preacher was drinking. He pours out his whiskey. He pours out the preacher's whiskey on top of the preacher, and he's like pretending to speak the word of God. So Paul is a man with his own philosophy, his own code. He doesn't really need religion, or he doesn't give it any mind anymore. It is revealed later that Paul was in the army, and so he saw a lot of violence in the army, and so he probably doesn't like preachers telling him what to do or what to think or how to pray and whatever, because most of these preachers have not seen the violence that Paul has seen, and he probably doesn't like that a lot of these preachers are hypocrites, and it's just a commentary on the individualism of the Old West. Kind of that's what America was built on. Individualism, having your own philosophy, making your own way, stuff like that. So yeah. So now the preacher during this whole ordeal tells him, yeah, like I said, Denton is a town of sinners. So he goes into Denton, and him, his horse, and his dog end up in Denton. They arrive in Denton. They have to go through Denton to get to the border to get into Mexico. But he needs to stop and buy some supplies, and he needs to take a bath. So he tries to go to this general store, but the store guy is not there. He left a sign that says "Be back in an hour." So in the meantime, he goes to this bar, saloon, whatever, old school Western bar, whatever. And in it, there's four men sitting at a table, and there's a salesman trying to sell them guns. But Paul just goes to the bar. He left his horse and his dog back at the general store to wait. He just goes to the bar, and he just tells the bartender all he wants is water, and he needs a bowl for his dog to give his dog water. And the bartender kind of looks at him funny, like, you don't want any alcohol or whatever, and whatever. But now the salesman is trying to sell these four other men guns, and one of them gets up and he says, like, oh, I'm the best person you can sell this gun to. Like, I'm the person who would make the best use of this gun. And he starts talking shit to all his friends, like, like he pulls the gun and he's like, "Did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Like, did you notice I pulled the gun?" And none of them, they were like, "No, man, I didn't notice at all." And then he turns over to Paul and says the same thing, and Paul doesn't answer. And this really pisses this guy off. This guy, his name is Gilly, and he turns out to be the bad guy of the movie. And so he scares the salesman away. And he's like, "We don't have enough money. Just go away." And he tells him, "This place is called the Valley of Violence. Do you want to find out what that means?" And the salesman's like, "No." And so he fucks off. He just goes away real fast. But so that just tells you this place is a violent place. It's called the Valley of Violence, So, I mean, this is a dangerous place. But Paul is overhearing all this. He doesn't seem to care. And once the salesperson leaves, Gilly keeps talking shit to Paul, and Paul just doesn't answer him. He doesn't care. He's not afraid of him. But Gilly goes outside and he tries to organize a fight between him and Paul, and he gets the whole town to gather around to watch them fight. Yeah, so he gets the whole town to gather around and watch them fight. But Paul doesn't want to fight. He's not saying anything. He's just letting him run his mouth. But then Gilly starts fucking with his dog. He asks his dog to come over. He's like, "Is that your dog?" or whatever. And this is when Paul is mad. He's like, "You don't fuck with my dog." Like, dogs, it's kind of funny, but dogs are more well-loved than humans. I mean, everyone loves dogs. People care more about dogs than they care about humans, Especially when they watch movies. If a human dies in a movie, no one cares. If the dog dies, it's a really fucking sad movie, So, I mean, dogs, man's best friend, I mean, people do care more about dogs than they care about humans often, So, anyway, he sees that he's fucking with his dog, and he goes and knocks Gilly out. One punch, Gilly goes to the ground, And then Gilly's men, his goons, pull guns on him, and then Gilly tells him to back off, kind of, but he just walks away, and Gilly has a girlfriend that rushes to his side, and yeah. So anyway, Paul goes into this hotel because he needs to take a bath. And apparently, back in the Old West, you could go to a hotel just to take a bath. I guess you didn't even need to get a room. You could just go there if you needed a bath, to take a bath. So him and his dog are taking baths, and there's this woman at the hotel. Her name is Marianne, and she's really happy that Paul knocked out Gilly. She's saying, like, "You should see what he's done to this town. It's not a safe place anymore. No one stays around here anymore because of what they did to this town. This is, like, I'm glad you punched him and knocked him out because," well, not really knocked him out, but punched him because she hates Gilly. But her sister, Marianne's sister, is the girl who is Gilly's girlfriend. Gilly is... her fiance, their fiancés, whatever. So, but Marianne and her sister fight a lot, and Marianne likes Paul. So yeah. So then he comes down from taking a bath and he meets this guy named Clyde. Clyde is the marshal. He's a U.S. marshal in charge of this town, Denton. And Gilly is Clyde's son. And Clyde says he looked at Paul's horse, and he figured Paul must have been in the army. And so, he says, "I know you're not a thief or a villain or anything. I just want you to get out of town." But he says he's assuming that Paul is a deserter. So he says, "Isn't the army busy, like, fighting Indians up in Kansas and Oklahoma?" And Paul's obviously not there anymore, so he must have deserted this war, and he's headed to Mexico to get away from the government so nothing happens to him for being a deserter, He obviously had some sort of moral problem with the way they were killing Indians, so it kind of shows Paul's morals, like he didn't want to just go slaughter Indians. He would rather run off to Mexico, So, but Clyde shows him some respect because he was in the army. But he's like, "I figure you're a deserter," and he's like, "Just get the hell out of town. Like, leave. Don't cause any more trouble." So yeah. He says, like, "I won't lock you up if you just get out of town." And Marianne gives him a photo. as Paul's leaving, Marianne gives him a photo of her and her sister and her father, like their family, and says, like, wherever you're going, take this photo, and maybe you can look at it and remember me, you know? So that's kind of a sweet moment, but he leaves town, travels through the wilderness, and then Paul keeps talking to he's sitting by the campfire, with his dog, and he keeps talking to his dog about this woman named Kathy. Now, you'll find out that Kathy is his wife. And in the movie, it reveals that he left his wife and his daughter behind when he joined the army, and I guess he's never going back there because he's going to Mexico. He doesn't want to go back and then find out he's a deserter, and then his family's going to look at him a certain way and something might happen to him with the law because he deserted, and he doesn't feel like he can face his family anymore. So he's going to Mexico, but he's still talking about Kathy to his dog and remembering good things that Kathy said, fond times with Kathy and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, and then when they're sleeping by the campfire, the dog hears something and starts barking, hears noises, voices. And Gilly and his goons are trying to sneak up on them. So Gilly's not done causing shit. He's trying to sneak up on Paul and his dog and his horse in the wilderness now. And so Gilly shoots the dog. Gilly kills... Well, he shoots the dog at first, and the dog doesn't die at first, but he shoots the dog. And then Paul gets really upset. And he's like, this moment is really tense, and Gilly's goons are on top of Paul, and Paul's begging, like, don't kill my dog, please, like, don't. And, Gilly starts questioning him about, like, him battling the Indians in the army and stuff like that. And he figures that he got this dog from the Indians, like this was an Indian's dog, and Paul just stole it or whatever. But anyway, Gilly takes a knife and sticks it through the dog, you know? So very sad, very sad. And like I said, people care more about dogs than they care about humans. So this is obviously going to be an important part of the movie. This movie is obviously taking that into consideration. And Paul loved this dog more than anything in the world, you know? Yeah, he's sleeping that night, and, well, okay, so Gilly's goons throw him off a cliff, but he doesn't go completely off the cliff. He lands kind of on a smaller part, like a shorter drop, and he survives, but they think he's dead. But while he's sleeping there after being thrown off the cliff, he's having flashbacks of killing Indians in this war with the army, and he looks traumatized. He shows him shooting an Indian, and then he looks traumatized, you know? And it obviously shows that he didn't like what he was doing, you know, like fighting these Indians. I mean, the Indians were there before them, and he probably realized this and doesn't think it's fair that they go and slaughter them, you know what I'm saying? So he's pretty much a good guy. He turned his back on his ways of the military, and he's going off to Mexico, you know? But he definitely looks traumatized after it shows him shooting an Indian. Now it goes back to the present moment. And, so he wakes up and he sees a vulture eating his dog, and he shoos away the vulture, and he says to his dog, like, he's so sorry, and then, he buries his dog, and when he's speaking at his dog's grave, he says, I know I promised I'm done killing, but I have to break that promise. He's going to kill Gilly and, his friends. He said when they held him down, like, I'll kill you if you shoot the dog. If you kill the dog. And then they kill the dog. He's like, you're dead, all of you. I'm killing you. And they didn't take it very seriously. They just left him stranded out there. They stole his horse. They stole all his, everything he had with him, and they just left him out there. So, but he is vowing to go back and kill Gilly and his goons, you know. So, he has no horse now. But he comes back upon the preacher again. He sees the preacher, and the preacher is shooting at him, and obviously the preacher is just trying to scare him, or he has really bad aim because none of these bullets are hitting him. They're hitting the ground next to him. But he just walks up to the preacher, and he takes his gun and his mule and leaves the preacher there again. Just leaves him there again. So, so that's kind of funny. They saw the preacher again. This time, Paul takes a sip of the preacher's whiskey, and he gives the preacher back his whiskey. So he's letting the preacher have something to drink while he's stranded there, whatever. So, and then it goes back to Marianne, and she's doing laundry, and she sees Paul in the distance, and Paul is riding towards Marianne. Obviously, he's going back into town on the mule he took from the preacher, and he's going back to kill Gilly and his goons. So, But she lets Paul into her home, and it's her father's home, and she says her father's sick, but she says let me stay here and bury my father, but then I'll go anywhere with you. She wants to go with Paul. She doesn't want to be in the town anymore. She wants to be with Paul. And Marianne says she'll help Paul kill those guys. But Paul says no, don't help me or whatever. But Marianne wants to go with him, but Paul says he's not there to save her. And he basically says, you assume you have it so bad in this town. There's people in other towns all across the country that have it just as bad as you. And, your situation is not special. Everyone else has it bad. He talks about how he left his kid and his wife and how he has it bad too, and he's not there to save her, basically. And it's harder to save her than she probably thinks it is, because anywhere they go, you can suffer anywhere, So, yeah. Paul says, I'm taking your horse, and he takes Marianne's horse and he rides it back into Denton. And so there's a guy in the hotel taking a bath, one of Gilly's goons, and Paul sneaks up on him while he's taking a bath in the hotel, and Paul slits his neck with a razor blade and drowns him. So that's the first one he killed. He killed one of the guys, slits his neck, slits his throat, and pushes him underwater and drowns him. So then Clyde and Gilly and the other goons, they show up and they see this happening, and they're like, we got to take care of this guy. So one of the men goes to the jail to hide all the weapons because they think Paul might steal the weapons from the jail. And then he goes up to the roof with the rifle. Because Clyde told him to go up to the roof. So he's up on the roof, and Paul sneaks up on him while he's on the roof, and he tells him to shoot Clyde and one of the goons. The goon's name, this goon that's down on the floor, on the ground, that he's telling him to shoot along with Clyde, his name is Tubby. Paul is trying to get this guy to kill those two for him while he's aiming a gun at this guy who's on the roof. But he refuses to do it, and Paul just kills this guy and throws him off the roof. But then Clyde and Tubby see him fall off the roof, and they're in the jail right now, and they go and try to trap Paul on the roof. But Paul makes it off the roof, and the marshal sees Clyde, and he shoots at Paul, and Paul makes it away, but Paul tells him he's not after him, he's just after the ones that killed his dog. But the marshal says he can't let this violence happen in his town, and he can't let Paul kill his son Gilly, so he's gonna do something about it. He feels like he has to, and then Paul says, well, he's gonna take Clyde down if Clyde gets in his way, and Clyde's like, whatever, then it's on. But Gilly was sent to protect the hotel sisters, the sisters who run the hotel, Marianne and Gilly's girlfriend. And a little earlier, it showed them in that scene or whatever, and he threw Marianne to the ground because Marianne said he offered to help Paul, and he didn't like that. And but this time, Gilly wants to go out and find Paul, even though he says that, his girlfriend says, you were here to protect us, you have to stay and protect us. He's like, no, I'm going out to get Paul. And but Gilly's girlfriend says to him that she's pregnant, so you shouldn't go out there. You should protect me because I'm pregnant. She could have been lying. She could have been lying about being pregnant, just wanting him to stay there and protect her. But he goes this is the worst possible time you could tell me that, And he's like, I'm still going out there. He's like, there's no way I'm not going out there. I don't care if you're pregnant. And this is the worst time you could have told me that. So, But he's like, this is not the right time for that conversation. And he leaves to go after Paul. And one of the goons, Tubby, is with Clyde. And I think they're in the jail. They're in one of the buildings. And he's complaining about how he's always called Tubby. He says he's not even that fat. He eats less than they do, and it's just the way God made him. He says his real name is Lawrence, and he wants to be called Lawrence. So this is kind of like a funny comic relief part of the movie. He's like, I'm not fat. Stop calling me Tubby, And Clyde's like, Jesus Christ, okay, whatever, like, for the love of God, I'll call you Lawrence. And but then he's like, for the love of God, just get away from the window. And as soon as he said that, Paul shoots him through the window, and Tubby dies, or Lawrence. But yeah, so that part is hilarious. And so Clyde is willing to reason with Paul. He leaves his guns and goes outside, and Gilly sees his dad going outside without his guns because Clyde is trying to reason with Paul to end all this madness. But Gilly says, what the hell is he doing? And then Gilly comes out with 2 guns, a gun in each hand. And Paul only has 1 gun. But Clyde is trying to stop all the violence. But Gilly just wants to kill Paul. And Paul wants to kill Gilly. And so Clyde gets caught in the middle of a gunfight. And they both shoot the shit out of each other, Gilly and Paul. And Clyde is standing there in the middle taking all the bullets. And he gets shot like 1,000,000 times. And then Paul slips away, and Clyde dies, and Gilly yells out to the town like it was his fault that he died. He tried to stop me from killing Paul or whatever. He doesn't directly say that, but he's like, it's his fault that he died. So does anyone else want to die? That'll be your fault too. So he just says, stay away from me. So, and this was his father. So yeah. But yeah, Paul got shot. Paul is shot in like the thigh or whatever. But he makes his way into the barn, and he sees the horse that they stole, Lady. He sees his horse. Her name is Lady, and I guess he's glad to see his horse. And he's like, we got to get out of here. But then and Marianne is outside watching all this happen. And Gilly makes his way into the barn looking for Paul. And then Paul is standing up on a beam, and he takes a rope and slings it down and whips it around Gilly's neck and jumps off the beam and then raises Gilly up, and he's hanging there, and he's like choking him. But then he lets him drop back down, and he's screaming like, why would you hurt my dog? Why would you kill my dog? And he gets on top of him, and he's beating the ever-living shit out of him, like punching him in the face so many times. And Gilly's face is all bloody, And so they're both, then he stops, and Paul kind of makes his way off to the side, and they're both laying there, and Paul's feeling really hurt because he's shot, and Gilly is feeling hurt, but then Gilly decides to get up and pull out a knife, and it looks like some shit's about to go down. This might be the end for Paul, but then Marianne shoots him from behind. She shoots him, he falls, and once he falls, you see Marianne behind him. And Marianne's like, I told you I could help, And so Paul and Marianne, they hug each other, and they press foreheads. And then Marianne is walking Paul back to the hotel to help him heal or whatever. And they see the preacher. The preacher made it into town. And Paul's like, preacher, you might want to stick around a while. Like, we could use you, whatever. So Marianne takes Paul into the hotel to heal him. And then the movie ends. So, yeah. Very good movie. Very good movie. I think it's very action-packed, and it's very satisfying to see him get revenge for what they did to his dog. It's very sad that the dog had to die, but it's very satisfying to see him get revenge. And I feel bad for Clyde, because Clyde doesn't want any violence, and he didn't want Gilly to go fuck with Paul's dog out in the wilderness. He just wanted Paul to go away, but his son, Gilly, couldn't help himself, and they go fuck with Paul out in the wilderness, and Clyde gets pissed when he finds that out, and I feel bad for Clyde. He didn't have to die. He didn't want any violence, but once Paul gets revenge on the first guy, he realizes we have to go after him, but he tried to end it. He tried to end it and resolve this peacefully after some people died, so he didn't want everyone to die, but his son wouldn't let him do that. His son ultimately was the downfall of Clyde, because his son was the one that started shooting right through him in the gunfight, and his son has the nerve to say it was Clyde's fault, and Clyde, he had like a wooden leg, so he already lost a leg, he already had some trouble, so I felt bad for him, but Gilly was really like a cocky son of a bitch, man. He kind of deserved what got to him, what got him. So, what happened to him? He just couldn't leave well enough alone, and he's the reason it started being called the Valley of Violence, and maybe now in the future it won't be the Valley of Violence. Maybe Paul will make it better again. But I think Paul and Marianne probably made it off to Mexico and are living in Mexico somewhere now, you know. Yeah, and one of Gilly's goons actually didn't want to hurt Paul out in the desert, and he asked Paul not to do anything to him when he was the one on the roof. When Paul found him on the roof, he said, "Look, I didn't want to do anything to you, and I feel really bad about what happened to your dog, and I have a daughter, and I really want to see her again." And Paul, you know, what's done is done, so Paul's going to do what he needs to do, you know. So he had the chance to not do anything, but he did something because he wanted to follow Gilly's orders. That was his fault, so now he's getting what's coming to him. So, yeah, but I felt bad for that guy too, because he didn't want anything to happen to Paul. He probably didn't even want to go out in the wilderness that night, but he was following Gilly's orders, and Paul, he probably feels bad for him, but, you know, you do what Gilly's going to tell you to do, then I'm going to do what I need to do to you, you know? So it just goes to show that you are the company you keep. Your vibe is your tribe, you know. So if you hang around with bad dudes, you might not like what they do, but they do some shit, and you're associated with that. And someone who's gonna come do other shit in response to that is gonna come after you too, whether you wanted to participate, whether you like it or not. You know, that it's gonna happen to you too. So I mean, just watch the company you keep, and yeah. Anyway, this was a really good movie, and I liked it a lot. In a Valley of Violence, great movie. Check it out. That's Paul, and that's Clyde. Let me see here. Yeah. And that's Tubby, the guy whose real name is Lawrence, who was complaining about being called fat. That was pretty funny. That was a good, funny part of the movie. And this is Marianne and Paul. There's more Paul. That's Paul, and that's Clyde again. So, yeah. Clyde is played by John Travolta, and Paul is played by Ethan Hawke. And Gilly is played by James Ransone, or Ranson, or whatever. Ransone, I think it is. Yeah. Great movie. And it was directed by someone, it's like T. West. I don't know if it's T.I. West or T. West. It's T.I. West, but it might be pronounced T, but it might also be pronounced T.I. I have no idea, but T. West, T.I. West, whatever. They directed this movie. And the intro is really cool. The animation for the intro is really cool. I like it. It's like classic Western letters and colors, but it's animated in a more current day style, and it's really cool. So, and the music was good. Classic Western style music brought suspense to it. Brought the right kind of vibe, and yeah, really good movie. I hope you all check it out. And if you check it out and then you watch this, or you watch this and you check it out, either way, either order, whatever. Tell me what you thought about the movie, and tell me what you thought about the review in the comments if you care to, if you want to. But you obviously don't have to. But anyway, that's all I have to say. Peace.